million like Mitchell. You've seen some stars come and go from Boston.
Sure.
Max players, Gordon Hayward.
Our tenure of Gordon Hayward in Boston officially came to a close Saturday afternoon when the veteran forward agreed to a 4-year, $120 million contract with the Charlotte Hornets.
Staggering amount of money, as you might expect, spent over the weekend by NBA teams everywhere. Brian Windhorst was tracking it all. He'll be with us in just a second. History is going to be made when Gasol plays his first game with the Lakers. Check this guys out. From ESPN Stats and Information, the Gasols are now the first set of brothers to both play for the storied franchise, the Los Angeles Lakers. Pau, of course, spent 6 seasons in L.A. from 2008 to 2014, and Kobe was effusive in his praise and how important Pau was to those championships, where he helped the Lakers win back-to-back titles in 2009, 2010. Now Marc joins the fray in purple and gold, although as Key said, since he was drafted by the organization, I guess it's a return engagement. That was a very short first tenure, though. Let's bring in Brian Windhorst on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. What do you make of this move, this Marc Gasol move by the Lakers, Brian?
Well, Rob Pelinka, their general manager, came out last week before all this and said, I don't want to be complacent with this roster. I don't want to just bring it back. And not only is he dramatically changed the makeup of the supporting players, but he's going to change their style of play. They were a very highly athletic defensive team last year, and Marc Gasol is one of the great defensive centers of the last decade. He's, past his prime, but still very smart defensively, but he's not the athlete that Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee were. And then, one of their big signing was Montrezl Harrell, bringing the Sixth Man of the Year over from down the hall. And Montrezl Harrell is a great offensive center, but not a strong defensive center. So I think you look at the Lakers, they have acquired the guys who finished first and second. Dennis Schroeder was second in six-man, known for their offense, not as much for their defense. So when you look at the Lakers, the changes, they have infused their offense. There will be so much more support for Anthony Davis and LeBron James. But the way they play defensively especially is going to go a little bit of a shift this season.
Wendy, take me out to the East for a little bit with Milwaukee. Obviously, getting Bogdanović was something that they thought was going to happen. Now that's not happening. How does this alter the decision for Giannis?
Jay, everything that happened in the draft last week, everything that happened over free agency over the last 3 days, it really is all behind the most important thing in this offseason. And that is, does Giannis sign the extension? That is the defining moment of what will be this NBA offseason. And in some ways, maybe even this season. This is, in my view, the biggest transactional decision since Kevin Durant going to the Thunder, even more than LeBron going to the Lakers or Anthony Davis going to the Lakers, because so many teams are going to drastically shift depending on what Giannis decides to do. If you look at the teams out there and the moves that have been made over the last few days, there are clearly teams hedging. The Miami Heat signed 4 players, all of them to 1-year contracts. They lost a couple of role players, Jay Crowder and Derek Jones, because those guys didn't want to take 1-year deals. The Dallas Mavericks made a couple of trades to offload long-term salary to leave themselves a Giannis slot open, and there's other teams that are maneuverable too, such as the Knicks and Raptors, who've been cautious as well. And I think there's 2 star players waiting to sign to see what Giannis does. That's Anthony Davis. He's coming back to the Lakers, but he may change the alteration of his contract, the way it's structured, to give the Lakers a window, if not for Giannis, but for somebody in a 1+1, because that's what LeBron is now on. And Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo signs a max contract that the Heat will not have the room, but if he waits a year, they will. So it's all Giannis. So now the question becomes, where's his head at? Well, the Bucks made a major move last week when they traded for Jrue Holiday, and giving up 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. They're not doing that unless they are confident. And I can tell you from talking to people there, they are confident. But it's not done yet. And, nobody knows how Giannis feels about the near miss on Bogdanović, a player, by the way, he really wanted to play with. And then the other moves that the Bucks made in substitute, DJ Augustine, Torrey Craig, Bobby Portis. Nobody knows how Giannis feels except for Giannis. And we're all waiting on that answer.
Wendy, let's go one layer deeper with the Miami Heat. So Alex Serratas, who is the agent for both Giannis and Bam Adebayo, how would you advise the Miami Heat to play this one out? Obviously, Giannis and Bam are close as well. I mean, you don't want to have a disgruntled person that doesn't feel like he gets his money. Obviously, when Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell, all these guys are signing pretty major extensions.
Jay, this is such an incredible, sensitive moment. I will say that it's interesting that all of the other stars from the 2017 draft class, all the guys who are ready for their payday, De'Aaron Fox, Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, all those contracts are done. There's Bam waiting, same agent as Giannis. Now, I know that this is a little bit dense, but bottom line is, even though it's the exact same amount of money, if Bam signs now versus next year, it cuts the Heat's available salary cap down by $13 million. We have seen a number of players in this exact spot over the years kind of have a understanding with the team, and they will wait to sign it to help the team. That said, in an era where we see guys, have these injuries, it's very unnerving, especially for a player who hasn't signed yet. So even if Bam, or even if Giannis does extend his contract here in the next few days, that's a big decision for the Heat because there are other free agents they could go get next year, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Wendy, the Hornets went out and signed Gordon Hayward to a $120 million deal. What does that do for the Hornets?
I mean, it gets them a scoring small forward, but in my mind, they're still not one of the top 7 teams in the East. This was a strange decision on a couple of fronts. One, Gordon Hayward, could have made $34 million this year and played on a contender and basically said, I want out of here to go play for a non-contender, in my view. And that's a little bit worrisome in Boston because now that's the 3rd player in the last 2 years, max player, who's walked out of there for nothing in return. Al Horford, Kyrie Irving, and now Gordon Hayward. And you try to start scratching your head and wonder what's going on there. Now, you can retort by saying they did get Kemba Walker, and that's where the Charlotte thing also doesn't make sense. Kemba Walker was, I don't even think arguably, the greatest player in the history of this version of the Charlotte Hornets since they came back as the Bobcats. And last year, Michael Jordan just wasn't willing to spend. They made him a very good offer, but it was less than the max, and he walked. And now a year later, they invest this huge amount of money in a player who, in my view, was not Kemba Walker, and has had some injury problems over the last few years. So, look, if you're a Charlotte Hornets fan, you're saying we've got LaMelo Ball, we've got Gordon Hayward. We were the last